Hey everyone, I'm Pete Buonora. I am a Principal Solutions Architect with AWS. We're here to talk today about AWS Cloud Governance for financial services and also how you would scale those, those governance tools as you build them out on AWS. So I've been working at AWS for a little over 5 years. I've worked with multiple large financial institutions, mostly in the Northeast, to migrate some in their entire data centers over to AWS, all their workloads, everything from the most critical, portfolio accounting systems and those sorts of things to trading systems to AWS. And we also have Bala here, who's focused on also on financial services and on the partner side.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to join you all.
Thanks, Bala. So yeah, today we're gonna go through some of the reasons why cloud governance is so important, how we look at implementing cloud governance on AWS, and then looking at building that at scale. So, not just the manual processes, but looking at how to automate those processes. And then we'll give you some calls to action as well. Excuse me. So why cloud governance? If we look at, over the thousands of customers and financial services that have migrated to AWS, and the ones that I've worked with closely, some of the keys and the most important components of that migration are some key pillars that we have customers put into place from the beginning. And so one key piece of that is getting your leadership in itself aligned to the cloud strategy, why that cloud strategy is important for building out future customer-facing capabilities or improving market insights and those sorts of things. And then being able to communicate that to the organization, whether it be their CISOs communicating to the security organizations on aspects of why it's important to move, or your CEO and your CIO and CTO on the business benefits and agility that it would bring, and why that move makes sense, and also continuously supporting that message and supporting as a catalyst to moving that forward, moving the strategy forward. Next is a cloud team and a centralized, what we call a cloud center of excellence. You can call it a cloud tiger team. You had different customers that have deployed different types of team and call them different things, but really it's a centralized team that is set up to enable the rest of the organization to migrate to the cloud and also build these governance capabilities that we're going to talk about. So they have the engineering expertise and cloud expertise to be able to build those things. And we have various programs at AWS to help bring those teams up to speed along with the rest of the organization to be able to to build out these capabilities as you go. And then supporting tools and processes that we'll talk about to enable that. So really, to get started, I mean, it can start with a lot of times, an engineer or someone at a customer, especially in the financial services space, that might be interested in, data science aspects or, quantitative methods and those sorts of things, and really has an idea that they have been trying to implement in their company for a long time, but they haven't been able to due to, maybe some constraints around resources and the time it takes to get infrastructure spun up, or the capabilities, or maybe it's just a bunch of people saying, no, that's not possible. And so a lot of times what we see is that those engineers or scientists will, spin something up on their own in the cloud and begin to experiment, and maybe they go home and over a weekend they've built something, come back and show people, hey, this is something we could do internally very easily, right? And so that might be how it gets started, and people really gravitate towards what the capabilities are, and that can enable enable those new things to happen inside of the new experimentation, which is great. But from there, that's next step in really grounding the capabilities and the foundations for that have to be built. And so yes, you can easily spin up a new application and build it out using services that we have that are even higher level services to quickly compose an application. But really, the next step is, how do I take that and repeat that pattern in a way that provides all of the governance and security controls and all the things that we need as financial services organizations that are, regulated and have all those, controls requirements to happen in the cloud in a way that can scale and that is automated. So, looking at defining your requirements for security cost and creating the ongoing tools and mechanisms for those to happen and be reinforced, ensuring the processes are optimized over time, and then making sure that you have solutions to continuously monitor that. So at Amazon, we have a saying that good intentions don't work. And so, the reason behind that, if you ask people you have a continuous problem that is happening, you try to solve it by asking people to, try harder or communicate better or do these things, you're kind of going to get what people already have is the good intentions to do that, right? So what we talk about is mechanisms and how do you deploy mechanisms that will reinforce the behaviors and things that we want people to do. And so this perfectly applies to governance as well. So what does good governance on AWS look like? We've established a framework for customers, and especially financial services, to be able to reference around this and to give you some guidelines for what it looks like when we talk about, defining requirements upfront for governance, what functions are going to be managed centrally, how they're going to be managed versus decentralized. And so, I mean, there's obviously some areas that we recommend that are very much centralized, like, the account structures and how the governance happens over AWS accounts and costs, controls, and showback and those sorts of things, which we'll talk about later. I also want to mention, though, that there are some benefits to a decentralized model in some cases, right? And so the way we as Amazon and AWS operate is in many cases is very much decentralized. And many of our customers have seen that benefit where development teams are empowered to build and experiment and create new things that will, innovate on behalf of your own customers, right? And so, I think many companies and financial services I've seen are really trying to move towards that, where they're shifting much of that responsibility back on developers and back on the engineering teams, but also have built the right governance and controls around that to enable that to happen. So, so that's really, one of the key elements I see in enabling really speed to delivery. And so, and then obviously the next piece of that is measuring the success of those, those governance tools and those governance processes over time. So the way we can help customers, the way we help customers to move towards that type of model, I mentioned the governance framework, but we also have the people part of that, right? So we can help customers through our solution architects that you have as a customer. You have an AWS solutions architect that you can reach out to. And we can also bring in expertise around governance and compliance and those aspects. We also have professional services teams that can help build some of those controls or help implement controls that we have as native services. And then we have partners that can also help with some of this tooling. So this really matters because customers in financial services really need to build out that from the start, at least the foundational components of this governance framework, and to meet compliance needs and also be able to move fast. So that's the piece of it, and then really looking at formalizing the operating model around this as well, and we can help with that through the mission solutions architects and professional services to basically work on what the operating model is today and assess that and look at what the future operating model of your company and the governance controls around that would look like, so you can then take advantage of these newfound capabilities of moving to AWS. So we talked about I think a good amount on the requirements aspects and some of the ways that we enable customers. There's also the well-architected framework that covers a lot of the areas of governance as well, that including in any of the security areas, whether you have those properly established. We have other assessment frameworks that we work with customers on to do that, along with AWS Artifact, which gives you our own compliance certifications and attestations that you can review. There's over 1,800 controls that we take care of that you no longer have to take care of as you move to AWS. So that's another piece of that. The tooling that to deploy and operate this, so your cloud team doesn't have to build all these things. Over the years, we have listened to our customers, and have the most demanding customers in financial services and otherwise. So we really have been listening and building. Over 95 to 95% of what we build is based on what customers want. So this is really where this comes in. And so giving you things like Control Tower, which is a way to create accounts in a framework that is set up with governance properly, and we'll go through that. Things like Security Hub, which is a dashboard for all those security controls. Service Catalog, which is a huge piece of governance, and some customers use their own IT service management platforms for this as well, like ServiceNow. I have many customers that have done that and built in ServiceNow capabilities into AWS to be able to have the right provisioning, governance processes. But also we have our own Service Catalog where you can import your own CloudFormation templates, which are templates that have all your controls built in, along with the infrastructure that can provision those things, and bringing them into a catalog where there's even more governance around that provisioning. Systems Manager for managing the down at the operating system level, along with being able to manage some of the automation you might want to do across your endpoints, across your servers. And then we get into how to measure these things, right? So Audit Manager is a new service, or fairly new service. It was announced at the end of last year that for that third line of defense, the third line is really been interested in how do I take all the manual processes that I'm doing today around auditing, and because within the cloud you have much more visibility into all the things that are happening via APIs, and you have much more visibility across your various services. How do I move all of those manual processes around auditing that I'm doing today with paper and sending people, requests to send me screenshots of things and all those processes that are happening? How do I enable the audit team by automating a lot of the manual process that they're doing today as they move to the cloud? So Audit Manager is a fantastic tool that will go out and actually pull all the evidence data from where it's already being captured, whether it be a cloud, like in your CloudTrail logging that is logging all your APIs, or we have another service called AWS Config that is capturing all of the config changes that are happening in the cloud. And so this tool will pull back the evidence from these different various tools and bring them into your own custom controls framework that your audit team might use, or some standard frameworks based on NIST or CIS benchmarks, or many other frameworks. So even compliance frameworks like HIPAA and PCI as well. So like this is one way that your teams at the third line can measure and assess your current posture. And then other tools that I mentioned as well, like config and that sort of thing. So AQR Capital is a customer of financial services investment customer that is managing 200 billion in assets. And here's a great example of a customer that has really enabled their developers to quickly spin up new environments and new applications with all the governance and controls that they require, in their industry, in the financial services industry, and in the compliance requirements that they have. So they have built, an environment where a developer can basically go into their service catalog, request that they have a new application. They're presented with a Git repository using our ECR service. And from there, they can create some descriptors that will deploy that will create a whole new environment for them, containerized environment on ECS. It's managed centrally through the AWS Service Catalog, so it has the governance and controls and separation of duties that you'd expect, but also enables them to be able to deploy, these environments much more quickly than they had been able to have before. It enables them to have easily turn on features like encryption for, say, with they've tied into AWS Certificate Manager to be able to have, data in motion encryption turned on automatically with basically configuration. They have turned on, a secrets management sidecar capability to be able to quickly connect over Kerberos to their, to the databases, even their on-prem databases. So they've built this whole framework, and that has been growing so rapidly at 5 to 10% per month. But they've been able to manage that because the governance is already built into the capability so that they can, allow this kind of process to happen and allow these teams to be able to innovate much more quickly. So how do we build governance? I'll talk a little about this, and then we'll turn it over to Bala, and we'll talk about this as well on the agility side. So key points of governance at scale and the focus points that we typically talk about are account management. So when you first get started, you really need some sort of landing zone or environment that is set up with all the capabilities you'd expect for governance. Be a centralized account using our AWS organizations service that can then manage across multiple accounts. There's some standardized sets of accounts that you would have in that foundational landing zone, whether it be a security account where your security team can run its tools, an auditing account, a logging account. These are some basic things that we expect, really want all our customers to implement within this landing zone. And then automation of maintenance tasks, automation and centralization of some security capabilities like AWS config can measure that your security controls and guardrails are turned on, those sorts of things. The next is budgeting and cost management. So another key that we've seen for governance is we have built-in capabilities for budgeting. You can set budgets within the AWS account. You can use tagging to come back with which organizations or sub-business units or business units are spending certain amounts on certain services. All these things are built into the AWS account or services. We also see customers, though, taking those things and building out dashboards for business units and application owners to really have ownership over their own spend and what services they're using and how they're using them, and upticks in spend and those sorts of things. So that's something I've seen over and over at most successful customers in migration, is really giving that visibility and ownership back to the application owners. And then security and compliance automation. So you're in the cloud now. In AWS, you have the services and the event-driven notifications for security to be able to, obviously you build your controls, and we have those services that provide those, in most cases, those controls that most large financial institutions are looking for. But also you can build or turn on the automated remediation of security events. And so we have many examples of this that we can provide to you, or reach out to your solutions architect on this as well. But we see this as a huge advantage as you're in the cloud and you have the ability to quickly respond to security events in an automated way. And we also have workshops and things that we can share or do on site with customers to do sort of game days and get them accustomed to how these types of automations can really help transform their organizations, a security perspective, and also automate, to be able to scale out to what you need to scale out to as you have developers spinning up environments or other things you're enabling these teams. You need to be able to scale those functions as well. So I mentioned Control Tower is one of those key tools that we have, or services that we've built. Really, customers we saw, in my early days at AWS as well, saw customers building out these things and help them with building out these landing zones for key, core functionality to get started on AWS. And we saw customers spending a whole lot of time and undifferentiated heavy lifting on these things that we really want them to focus on innovation. So we built a service called Control Tower that will basically do this for you. And you have ability to tie into your existing centralized identity access management systems, whether it be your Active Directory, or if you have Okta for federation, or Ping Identity, or OneLogin, or Azure AD. And any of these things can be tied into the centralized identity access management and AWS SSO to be able to manage at scale all of your roles and access across all of your AWS accounts. Next is establishing a set of guardrails. So you can set that up within Control Tower such that you have those guardrails enforced across all of your accounts. That can be, ensuring that all, encryption is turned on across all of your RDS databases or all of your EC2 instances that are deployed. There's just a whole number of different guardrails that you can establish and security controls you can establish to be able to have that deployed across your accounts and enforced continuously across your accounts. And then automating the provisioning of new accounts that already have baked in by default all of the security controls, all the visibility and access controls, and ties into all the existing tools from the start, right? So it's very common for a business unit to have sub business units or sub applications that will have their own AWS accounts and environments, and so this ties that together, being able to have centralized provisioning of those accounts with all the right guardrails and visibility into those accounts through AWS organizations centrally, and then controls that you can deploy out to these accounts. So here's another example. We talked about AQR previously, but this one is a large brokerage services firm that really needed to create multiple Sandbox accounts for enabling their developers to try out new services or maybe build something that they wanted to try and innovate on, build out experiments, those sorts of things. And so this is just one example of a customer that has built this out. We've seen it many times where you might have lab environments or environments built out that are then automatically torn down on a periodic basis and rebuilt. But it gives developers a way to get in and try out, as we're constantly coming out with new services and new features, to try those things out before they've officially gone through all the centralized governance processes that we see financial services set up for approval of new services, right? So there's usually a process for vetting and approval of services. This is a way to give them a contained environment. And so this can happen through their ServiceNow Service Catalog or AWS Service Catalog. In this case, the account admin can go in and deploy via CloudFormation a set of accounts, multiple accounts through that gets logged in DynamoDB. As that new accounts are created, it's basically a cycle that goes through. It adds it to DynamoDB, the account's created and then confirmed, and then you have a set of new lab accounts for the developers to be able to test in, and within that you have the controls baked in, right? So they can't spin up large P3 instances, for instance, they can only spin up, very smaller instances to be able to test. Same with, the maybe if it's like Redshift, the Redshift instance sizes they can spin up. There's controls around budget. There's controls around security that are, yes, it does allow them to use these new services and test, but it also implements at least the minimum, set of controls that is required by the organization, and also has some automated alerting and visibility into those accounts, so that there are some amounts of notifications that come out of these accounts. But it also, I think, helps the security organization, because security organization gets an early view into the use of these services, and also can participate in some of the evaluation process as developers are looking at them. So instead of waiting until the end and saying, developers saying, yes, I built this whole thing out, here's security team, come and take a look at it and assess it, they're able to interact and get into these environments much sooner and just see what types of roles are being used. We have tools like Identity Access Management Access Analyzer, which can actually analyze the roles that are actually being used within these environments, and these can be these will create identity access management policies that will give you like what is the least privilege that has been used within these accounts. So at least the security team has a head start on that as well. So that will automatically give kind of least privilege advisory and account policies, so that you'll have a view into that much sooner. So now I'll turn it over to Bala, and he's going to go through a lot more of the different agility use cases and things that have been built.
Thank you so much, Peter. Hi, everyone. This is Bala KP. I'm a partner solutions architect, working very closely with partners and our customers in insurance and financial services domain. So, if you see, Peter talked about how you can achieve agility and governance in the enable and provision of the customer journey. So let's look at how we can achieve the same, from the operational aspects of it. So when you look at operating with agility and control, there are 4 aspects to it. One is, how do you monitor resources and workloads, and so that you get the right visibility into how they are being used and how they are being performed. Like, for example, you have observability tools such as Amazon CloudWatch. Leveraging those tools, you'll be able to get that complete visibility of your environment. And the second thing is, how do you audit? Because it's very important that you audit everything from in terms of how these resources are configured, how it is being accessed, and what sort of policies are being enforced. So so that you have the complete audit trail of your environment in cloud. And the third key thing is, like, how do you take operational actions on those resources? So since we are talking about governance at scale, from an operational standpoint, how do you implement automation so that you are able to manage and take operational actions, leveraging tools like systems manager that Peter talked about, and how you can basically operate them at scale. And last is, how do you get continuous visibility into your environment, so that you have complete visibility and control. So let's take let's basically take a look at an example of how one of our customers, insurance organization, they have basically enabled developers freedom by codifying the compliance policies, so they can basically operate at scale. So if you see the use case scenario here is, they are developers, they build CloudFormation templates as part of building out their application stack. On the other hand, the compliance administrators wanted to make sure that the services that they deploy through CloudFormation stack are compliant with compliance policies. For instance, let's say they wanted to ensure that these CloudFormation stacks, the resources that are provision through CloudFormation stacks only is allowed to provision in certain regions. And for example, if they are basically adding an EBS volume, just to make sure that the encryption flag is turned on, and also making sure that they only are authorized to use certain services. So this is typically can be achieved through service catalog and AWS cloud, AWS config. to detect any non-compliance resources, but what they wanted to do is they wanted to basically shift this early on in the development cycle. So here you see a tool called CloudFormation Guard, which is an open source tool used by this organization. So what they did is their compliance admins, they built all the guard rule sets, which is in a very simple policy definition language, and they basically handed off those rule sets to developers, so that when developers build CloudFormation templates, they're able to validate against those rule sets to ensure that they are not having any non-compliance scenarios in their CloudFormation stack. So this is an example of how you can implement shift left testing of compliance policies as part of CI/CD process. With the cloud with the CloudFormation Guard tool, now the developers they're able to easily evaluate templates locally as they write them, and also this can be integrated in the CI/CD pipeline, so that if there are any non-compliance related code that is there in the CloudFormation template, it can be quickly detected, and your build can be stopped. So this is one way they have implemented compliance policy as code, so that they are able to operate at scale. Let me take you to the second focal point that Peter talked about. The second focal point is like how we can achieve governance at scale, primarily from a budget and cost management aspects of it. I mean, if you see, what we are seeing is increasingly organizations, they are actually building a cloud financial management function, which is basically a set of activities that enables both the technology organizations and also the finance organizations to be able to manage and optimize their cost cost of running resources in AWS. So if you see, the primary function of this cloud financial management is to ensure that they are able to run those applications at the most cost efficient manner. And we have four key pillars from a budget and cost management standpoint. The first one is measurement and accountability. So in this pillar, the key thing in this pillar is to see how you're able to provide that visibility and accountability on the spend. So things like how you can tag your resources so that you're able to gain full visibility into the cost of running those applications. So that is the key outcome, specifically in the measurement and accountability pillar. The second one is cost optimization. In the cost optimization, the key enablement is organizations, they only want to pay for resources that they need. Then how do they achieve that desired outcome? So they're able to evaluate their existing applications running in cloud through architecture reviews. Peter touched upon well-architected framework and how you can have cost optimization as part of the well-architected framework, so that you can identify any over provisioning resources, so that you're able to meet appropriate scaling demands as you grow your environment in AWS. And the third one is planning and forecasting. And it's very important to see how you can estimate and also project future spends in cloud using tools like AWS Budget, so that you are able to project what is your total cost of running those applications in cloud, primarily from a fiscal discipline standpoint. And the last pillar in budget and cost management is financial operations. So how we are able to continuously operate with the right guardrails in place, primarily from cost management, and also ensuring that there is tighter integration between your financial group and the technology organizations, so that they are able to accelerate adoption of your applications in cloud much faster. So this is the second focal point that we recommend primarily when you implement governance at scale. So let's look at the third focal point, which is security and compliance automation. Security is a job zero for us at AWS, and as you're aware, security and compliance is a shared responsibility model that we share with our customers. In a shared responsibility model, AWS operates, manages, and controls the components of the security of the cloud, and our customers are responsible for security in the cloud. So in order to operate your workload securely, there are certain best practices that we need to follow in this each security pillars that you see here. Probably let's start with identity and access management. So identity and access management enables you to securely manage identities, resources, and permissions at scale. Like for example, you are seeing the list of identity development services here, which enables you to implement fine-grained access controls so that you can securely manage access to workloads and applications. Let's look at the second pillar in the security and compliance automation, which is detection pillar. So it can be broadly classified into two areas. One is how do you detect unexpected or unwanted configuration changes in your environment, and also the other one is how do you detect anomalous or unexpected behavior, which could be a security event of interest in your environment. So we have services such as AWS config that Peter talked about as part of the overall tool set. So how you can use AWS config to detect configuration drift or misconfiguration in your environment, and also solutions such as Amazon Guard Duty to detect anomalous behavior in your environment as well. So I'll quickly move on to the next pillar, which is infrastructure protection. So which infrastructure protection, the key thing is how you can implement fine-grained access controls to every network control point so that you're able to implement defense in depth strategies when it comes to protecting your environment in cloud. So the fourth one is data protection. So things like how you can implement data classifications for your data, and how do you implement encryption at rest, encryption at transit, so that you're able to protect your data and workloads at scale. So we up until now we discussed all the preventive and detective controls. Let's look at incident response. So incident response is one of the very key functions. So it is important to have a right mechanism to respond and address to any security events of interest. So having like automated incident response is very critical when we actually scale our environments in cloud. I'll probably give you an example on how one of our customers implemented automated incident response.
Hey,
And
Bala,
the last, yes.
Bala, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left, so I just want to give you a time check, okay?
Perfect. Thanks for the reminder, Ron. I think I'll be on time. So the last one is compliance tower, which I think Peter already talked about, how we can use AWS Audit Manager so that you can continuously audit and compliance as you increase the level of transparency when you use your environment. So let me quickly pivot to an example of how a leading financial services organization implemented automated incident response as code. So, I mean, if you see here, the example is like typically during an incident response cycle, you need to basically, gather information about a potential security event of interest and perform analysis and follow through with remediation. So, for instance, if you see here, this complete incident response has been automated leveraging AWS native services. Let's say if there is a security event of interest detected for an EC2 instance, the security analyst, or it could be even an IR tool that can automatically send the EC2 instance ID through API gateway to the step functions, which basically orchestrates a series of steps that gathers forensics data about those EC2 instances, things like copying metadata, taking EBS snapshots, and also running memory dumps and process dumps so that the security team can do a further deep dive. So if you see here, steps 3 to 5 completely automated the artifact gathering process during an incident response, and once those data is gathered, the incident, the specific EC2 instance is quarantined to a specific forensic security group for further deep dive. This is an example of how you can implement incident response as a code as you scale security and compliance function in AWS. So, in closing, I would like to wrap up with 3 call to action items. The first one is shift left compliance, so you can implement preventative checks early on in the development cycle, so you don't have to spend a whole lot of time remediating them once implemented. We talked about CloudFormation Guard, how it can enable you to achieve that objective. The second key thing, what we are learning from our customers is there is a continuous feedback loop between the development community and as well as the compliance teams, so that as and when development teams tries out new services, compliant team works very closely with them to implement the right guardrails so they can accelerate adoption of new services. And the third important thing is lean with automation first approach, so we can improve mean time to detect and respond as you scale your environment in AWS. So with that, there are few reference resources which can, which you can, deep dive offline. And with that, I will turn it over to Ron. Thank you so much for your time.